Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the human ship Liberty's Edge when the communication officer turned to him with wide eyes. "Sir, we're getting something strange. It's not like anything we've seen before." The bridge fell. Quiet as strange sounds filled the air. It was not human language, but something else entirely. The universal translator worked slowly, turning the alien words into something they could understand. "Please help us," the voice said, full of fear and sadness. "We are the Zephyrians. Our world is dying. Our people are being killed. We have nowhere else to turn." Dr. Lisa Chang, the ship's expert on alien life, moved quickly to her station. Her fingers flew over the controls as she worked to decode the full message. What she found made her face go pale. "Captain," she said, her voice shaking, "this is from a species called the Zephyrians. They're being attacked by something called the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthaks have already destroyed 3 of their worlds. Now they're coming for the Zephyrian home planet." Commander Ryan Torres stepped forward. He was Morrison's second in command, a man who had seen many battles. "How long do they have?" "According to this message, maybe a few days at most, Doctor," Chang replied. "The Vorthaks are already in their system. They're bombing cities from space." Morrison stood up from his chair. He had been in space for 10 years, but he had never received a message like this. The Zephyrians were begging for help from anyone who would listen. "Tell me about these Zephyrians," Morrison said. Dr. Chang pulled up what information they had. "They're a peaceful species. They evolved from plant eaters on a world with no dangerous predators. They don't know how to fight wars. Their ships are built for trade and exploration, not combat." Lieutenant Amy Foster, their tactical officer, shook her head. "And the Vorthaks?" "The complete opposite," Dr. Chang said. "They're warriors. They take over worlds by force. Their ships are built only for war. They're bigger than us, stronger than us, and they have better weapons." The bridge was quiet for a moment as everyone thought about what this meant. Then Morrison asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Has anyone else answered their call for help?" Dr. Chang checked the message again. "They sent the same message to 17 different species across the galaxy. So far, no one has replied." "No one?" Morrison asked. "No one," she confirmed. "The other species all think the Vorthaks are too dangerous to fight. They have a rule about not getting involved in other people's wars." Morrison walked to the main screen, which showed the stars ahead of them. He thought about the Zephyrians, a peaceful people who had never hurt anyone, now facing complete destruction. He thought about the other 17 species who had received the same message and chosen to do nothing. "Sir," Commander Torres said, quietly, "we're just one ship. The Vorthaks have an entire fleet. If we go there, we'll probably die." Morrison nodded. Torres was right. The smart thing to do would be to ignore the message like everyone else had done. They were explorers, not soldiers. Their job was to map new star systems and make contact with friendly aliens, not fight wars. But something about the message bothered him. The fear in the alien voice. The way they had said, "Please help us," like it was their last hope. "Dr. Chang," Morrison said, "play the message again." The strange alien voice filled the bridge once more. This time, Morrison listened more carefully. He could hear something in the background, sounds of explosions, people screaming, buildings falling down. "They're recording this while their world is being attacked," Morrison realized. "Yes, sir," Dr. Chang said. "The message was sent from their capital city. According to the timestamp, it was recorded just 6 hours ago." Morrison closed his eyes. 6 hours ago, while he was eating dinner and reading reports, an entire civilization was crying out for help. Their children were dying. Their cities were burning. And no one in the galaxy cared enough to help them. "Sir?" Torres asked. "What are your orders?" Morrison opened his eyes and looked around the bridge. His crew was waiting for him to make a decision. They trusted him to lead them, even if it meant leading them into danger. He thought about why humans had come to space in the first place. It was not just to explore or to trade. It was to find their place among the stars, to discover what kind of species they were when faced with the unknown. Chief Williams, Morrison called to his engineer over the intercom. Yes, sir, came the reply. How fast can you get our weapon systems ready for combat? There was a pause. Sir, our weapons are designed for defense against pirates and small threats. We're not equipped to fight a military fleet. That's not what I asked, Morrison said. How fast can you get them ready? Give me 4 hours, sir. I can boost power to the plasma cannons and load all our missile tubes. But sir, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I am, Morrison said. We're going to help them. The bridge exploded with activity. Torres immediately began plotting a course to the Zephyrian system. Dr. Chang started analyzing everything they knew about Vorthak technology and tactics. Lieutenant Foster began working on battle plans with their limited resources. Sir, Torres said as he worked, I have to ask, why are we doing this? Why risk our lives for aliens we've never met? Morrison looked at the message display where the Zephyrian plea for help was still showing. Because they asked for help and no one else answered. Because someone has to stand up to bullies. Because if we don't help them, who will? He paused, then added, and because that's what humans do. When someone cries for help, we answer. Dr. Chang looked up from her station. Captain, I'm reading more about human history in our database. Did you know that other species call us Deathworlders? What does that mean? Morrison asked. It means we come from a world that would kill most other species. They think we're unusually good at violence because our planet taught us to be survivors. Morrison smiled grimly. Then maybe it's time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do when someone threatens innocent people. The Liberty's Edge changed course, heading toward a war they had little chance of winning. But for the first time since leaving Earth, Captain Morrison felt like they were doing exactly what humans were meant to do among the stars. 3 days later, the Liberty's Edge dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephyrian system. What Captain Morrison saw on the main screen made his blood run cold. The Zephyrian homeworld was surrounded by 3 massive alien ships. Each one was twice the size of anything humans had ever built. They were dark gray and covered in weapon ports. As Morrison watched, bright beams of energy shot down from the ships to the planet below. Where the beams hit, entire cities disappeared in flashes of light. My God, whispered Commander Torres. They're destroying everything. Dr. Chang was working, frantically at her station. I'm picking up Zephyrian ships trying to fight back, but they're not warships. They look like cargo vessels and passenger ships that have been fitted with whatever weapons they could find. Lieutenant Foster shook her head as she watched the tactical display. It's not even a fair fight. The Zephyrian ships are being destroyed as soon as they get close. Morrison gripped the arms of his chair. They were too late. The attack had already begun, and the peaceful Zephyrians were being slaughtered. Take us closer, Morrison ordered. But keep us hidden behind that asteroid field. I want to see what we're dealing with. As they moved closer, the true horror of the situation became clear. The 3 Vorthak ships were not just attacking military targets. They were systematically destroying cities, farms, and anything else that supported life on the planet. This was not a conquest, it was complete destruction. Captain, Dr. Chang said, her voice tight with anger, I'm picking up communications from the planet. The Zephyrians are broadcasting on all frequencies, begging the Vorthaks to stop. They're offering to surrender, to give them anything they want. What's the response? Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer. Nothing. The Vorthaks aren't even talking to them, they're just killing everyone. Lieutenant Foster pulled up tactical data on the Vorthak ships. Sir, I've been studying their attack patterns. These aliens are good at what they do, but they're predictable. They use the same formation, the same tactics, over and over. Tell me more, Morrison said. They rely on fear, Foster explained. Their entire strategy is based on making their enemies too scared to fight back. Look at how they're attacking. They could destroy the planet in an hour if they wanted to, but instead they're taking their time. They want the Zephyrians to suffer and panic. Dr. Chang had been analyzing the alien communications. I've been listening to Vorthak battle chatter. Captain, these aliens have never lost a fight. In their entire history, every species they've attacked has either surrendered immediately or been destroyed quickly. So they've never faced real resistance, Morrison realized. Never. And there's something else. From what I can tell, the Vorthax evolved as pack hunters on a world with heavy gravity. They're physically powerful, but they need to feel like they're winning to fight effectively. When they face unexpected resistance, they become confused. Morrison thought about this. Humans had evolved differently. On Earth, they had faced ice ages, natural disasters, and predators that were bigger and stronger than they were. Humans had learned to survive by being stubborn, creative, and refusing to give up even when things looked hopeless. We need to get someone down to the planet, Morrison decided. I want to see how the Vorthax fight on the ground. Lieutenant Foster looked concerned. Sir, that's extremely dangerous. If they catch our people, then we'll have to make sure they don't get caught, Morrison said. He turned to the communications officer. Get me Sergeant Ben Clark. A few minutes later, Sergeant Clark appeared, on the bridge. He was a tough man who had served in Earth's military before joining the space fleet. If anyone could sneak onto an enemy planet, it was him. Sergeant, I need you to take a small team down to the Zephyrian planet, Morrison explained. Stay hidden. Observe how the Vorthax operate and make contact with any surviving Zephyrians if you can. Clark nodded. How many men can I take? 4, including yourself. Take the stealth shuttle, get in, learn what you can, and get out. 2 hours later, Clark and his team launched from the Liberty's Edge in a small shuttle designed to avoid detection. Morrison watched them disappear toward the planet, hoping he was not sending them to their deaths. While they waited, Dr. Chang continued studying the Vorthax ships. Captain, I'm learning more about how these aliens think. They're not just warriors, they're bullies. They only attack species they know they can defeat easily. What makes you say that? Morrison asked. Look at their target selection. Every species they've conquered was peaceful and had no real military. They've never attacked anyone who could fight back effectively. Commander Torres was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Sir, I'm picking up news reports from other systems. Word is spreading about what's happening here. Some species are saying it's terrible, but none of them are offering to help. Why not? Morrison asked. They're afraid. The Vorthax have a reputation. Everyone knows that if you fight them and lose, they'll come after your world next. Morrison stared at the tactical display showing the 3 massive enemy ships. By any logical measure, what he was thinking was crazy. 1 human ship against 3 alien dreadnoughts was not a fight. It was suicide. But as he watched another Zephyrian city disappear in a flash of light, Morrison realized that logic did not matter. Someone had to stand up to these bullies, even if it meant dying in the attempt. Sir, the communications officer called out. I'm getting a signal from Sergeant Clark's team. Clark's voice crackled over the speakers. Captain, you need to hear this. We've made contact with a group of surviving Zephyrians. They're hiding in underground tunnels beneath their capital city. What's their situation? Morrison asked. Bad, sir. The Vorthax have landed ground troops. But here's the thing. These aliens are sloppy when they're winning. They're not watching their backs because they assume everyone is too scared to fight them. Can the Zephyrians fight back? Not the way they are now, sir, but they're willing to learn. And Captain, these Vorthax have never faced guerrilla warfare. They don't know how to fight an enemy that won't stand still and face them directly. Morrison smiled grimly. Humans had invented guerrilla warfare. They had fought and won against superior enemies by being smarter, more determined, and more willing to take risks. Clark, stay with the Zephyrians. Start teaching them how to hide, how to strike quickly, and how to disappear. We're going to turn this from a massacre into a war. Yes, sir. And Captain? These Vorthax have never lost before. I think it's time someone taught them what losing feels like. Captain Morrison made his decision while watching another Zephyrian city burn. He could not sit back and watch an entire species die while he did nothing. All hands, this is the captain, he announced over the ship's communication system. We are about to engage 3 enemy vessels that are each twice our size. The odds are against us, but we're going to fight anyway. Why? Because that's what humans do. We stand up to bullies, even when we're outnumbered. On the bridge, Commander Torres looked worried. Sir, What's the plan? Morrison studied the tactical display. The 3 Vortex ships were positioned in a triangle formation around the planet, taking turns bombing different continents. They were following a pattern, predictable and methodical. They expect us to attack like everyone else does, Morrison said. Head on, ship to ship, following all the rules of space combat. But we're not going to do that. Lieutenant Foster understood immediately. Guerrilla tactics. In space. Exactly. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it, when they don't expect it, and then disappear before they can hit us back. Dr. Chang had been monitoring communications from the planet. Captain, I have good news from Sergeant Clark. He's made contact with a large group of Zephyrians hiding in the mountains. They're willing to fight, but they need weapons and training. What kind of weapons do they need? Morrison asked. Simple ones, explosives mostly. The Zephyrians are excellent engineers. They build all the mining equipment for this part of the galaxy. Clark says they can turn their industrial tools into weapons if we show them how. Morrison nodded. Do it. And tell Clark to teach them everything he knows about guerrilla warfare. Chief Engineer Pete Williams appeared on the main screen from the engine room. Captain, I've been working on something. You know how these Vortex ships are so big and heavily armored? Yes. Well, big ships have big blind spots. I've been studying their design, and there's a section near their main engines where their sensors can't see anything. If we could get close enough, we could plant explosives inside their ship, Morrison finished. Pete, you're a genius. The plan was crazy, but it might work. While the Liberty's Edge kept the Vortex busy with hit-and-run attacks, a small team would use maintenance pods to sneak onto the enemy ships and sabotage them from within. Who's going to volunteer for the suicide mission? Torres asked. I am, Morrison said immediately. Sir, you can't. If something happens to you, then you'll be in command. But Torres, this has to work. Those people down there are counting on us. 3 hours later, Morrison found himself squeezed into a tiny maintenance pod with Sergeant Clark, who had returned from the planet. The pod was designed for fixing the outside of spaceships, not for sneaking onto enemy vessels. You sure about this, Captain? Clark asked as they approached the first Vortex ship. No, Morrison admitted, but I'm sure about what happens if we don't try. The Vortex ship was enormous up close. Its hull was covered in strange symbols and weapon ports. Morrison piloted the tiny pod toward the section Williams had identified, praying that the alien sensors would not detect them. They landed on the hull with a soft thump. Morrison held his breath, waiting for alarms to sound, but nothing happened. The Vortex had not noticed them. Working quickly, they cut through the hull with laser tools. Inside the ship, the corridors were dark and filled with strange smells. The Vortex themselves were huge, nearly 8 feet tall with thick, muscular bodies and faces that looked like they belonged on predatory animals. They're ugly, Clark whispered. And overconfident, Morrison whispered back as they watched a group of Vortex soldiers walk past. The aliens were not even watching for enemies inside their own ship. They planted explosives throughout the ship's critical systems: engines, weapons control, life support. The devices were small but powerful, designed to cause maximum damage when they went off simultaneously. Meanwhile, the Liberty's Edge was executing its own part of the plan. Commander Torres ordered lightning-fast attacks on the other 2 Vortex ships, firing missiles and then jumping away before the aliens could respond. The Vortex were becoming frustrated. They were used to enemies that stood still and fought. According to predictable patterns, the human ship kept appearing, attacking and vanishing like a ghost. Unknown vessel, came a transmission from the lead Vortex ship. You will cease your attacks and surrender immediately, or we will destroy your pathetic ship. Torres smiled as he replied, This is Commander Torres of the human vessel, Liberty's Edge. We don't surrender to bullies. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Clark's crash course in guerrilla warfare was paying off. The Zephyrians had blown up 3 Vortex supply depots and ambushed 2 ground patrols. The aliens were starting to realize that this was not going according to plan. The Zephyrians are natural engineers, Clark reported to Morrison over his radio. They've turned their mining explosives into bombs that can take out a Vorthak tank. And they're fast learners. They've already figured out how to set traps. Morrison and Clark finished planting their explosives and made their way back to the maintenance pod. But as they prepared to leave, they heard footsteps in the corridor. Group of Vorthak soldiers had discovered the hole they had cut in the hull. The aliens were massive and heavily armed, but they looked confused. They had never dealt with enemies who sneaked onto their ships. Human infiltrators, one of them growled in their translator-converted language. How did they get inside? Morrison and Clark exchanged glances. They were trapped, outnumbered, and surrounded by enemies twice their size. Any reasonable person would surrender, but Morrison was not feeling reasonable. He was thinking about the Zephyrian cities he had watched burn, about the innocent people crying for help while the galaxy turned its back on them. "Clark," he said, quietly, "remember what I said about humans being Deathworlders?" "Yes, sir." "Time to show them what that means." Morrison pressed the detonator. Throughout the Vorthak ship, explosives went off simultaneously. The lights went out, alarms started screaming, and the artificial gravity failed. In the chaos, Morrison and Clark fought their way to the maintenance pod. The Vorthaks were strong and tough, but they were also confused and scared. They had never faced enemies who were willing to blow up the ship they were standing on. As they escaped in the pod, Morrison watched the first Vorthak ship break apart. Secondary explosions lit up space as the vessel's own weapons and fuel supplies caught fire. "One down, 2 to go," Clark said. But the remaining Vorthak ships were no longer focused on bombing the planet. They had turned their attention to the small human vessel that had just destroyed their flagship. The real battle was about to begin. The 2 remaining Vorthak ships turned away from the planet and focused all their weapons on the Liberty's edge. Captain Morrison watched the tactical display as hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked toward his ship. "Evasive maneuvers," Commander Torres shouted from the captain's chair. Morrison had returned to the bridge after his sabotage mission, but Torres was still coordinating the battle. The human ship twisted and spun through space, dodging the alien weapons with moves that would have been impossible for larger vessels. But even with their superior speed, they could not avoid everything. Warning lights flashed as enemy fire hit their shields. "Shields down to 60%, Lieutenant Foster reported. "Sir, we can't keep this up much longer." Morrison studied the enemy formation. The 2 Vorthak ships were moving closer together, trying to trap the Liberty's edge between them. It was a smart tactic, but it also gave Morrison an idea. "Pete," he called to the engine room, "how much power can you give me for one massive acceleration?" "Enough to break every bone in our bodies if we don't have inertial dampeners," Williams replied. "Perfect. Torres, I want you to fly us straight between those 2 ships." "Sir, that's suicide. They'll blow us apart." "Not if we're moving fast enough, and not if we give them something else to worry about." Morrison turned to Dr. Chang. "Lisa, remember those biological weapons you were working on? The ones designed to affect Vorthak physiology?" "Yes, but Captain, we never finished testing them. We don't know if they'll work." "We're about to find out. Load them into our torpedo tubes." As the Liberty's edge accelerated toward the gap between the 2 enemy ships, Morrison opened a communication channel to the planet below. "Clark, this is Morrison. Are your people ready?" "Yes, sir," came the sergeant's voice. "Every Zephyrian resistance cell is in position. Just give us the word." The word is given. Hit them with everything you've got. All across the planet's surface, explosions erupted simultaneously. Zephyrian resistance fighters, trained by Clark in the art of guerrilla warfare, struck at every Vorthak ground installation at the same time. Supply depots, communication towers, and landing platforms disappeared in balls of fire. The Vorthaks on the ground had never experienced anything like it. They were used to fighting enemies who stood still and faced them directly. But the Zephyrians had learned to strike from the shadows and disappear before the aliens could fight back. In space, the distraction worked perfectly. The Vorthak ship commanders were receiving panicked reports from their ground forces, just as the Liberty's edge shot between their vessels at impossible speed. Morrison fired the experimental biological weapons directly into the hulls of both ships. The torpedoes punched through the alien armor and released their contents inside the vessels. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Vorthak communications filled with screams of pain and confusion. The biological agents were working, attacking the aliens' nervous systems and making it impossible for them to think clearly. "It's working," Dr. Chang shouted. "The Vorthaks are losing coordination. Their life signs are becoming erratic." But the battle was not over yet. Even confused and in pain, the Vorthaks were still dangerous. One of their ships managed to lock onto the Liberty's edge with a powerful tractor beam. "We're caught," Torres reported. "They're pulling us in." Morrison watched the alien ship grow larger on the main screen. He could see weapon ports opening, preparing to destroy them at point-blank range. "Sir," Foster said quietly, "we have one option left. We could ram them." Morrison considered it. The Liberty's edge was much smaller than the Vorthak ship, but if they hit the right spot at full speed, they might be able to cripple it. Of course, it would also mean certain death for everyone on board. Before Morrison could respond, Chief Williams appeared on the main screen. "Captain, I have a better idea. Remember how we sabotaged the first ship? Well, I've been studying the wreckage and I figured out how their technology works." "What are you thinking, Pete?" "I can overload our engines and create a feedback pulse through their tractor beam. It won't destroy us, but it'll fry every electronic system on their ship." "Do it." Williams worked frantically in the engine room while the Vorthak ship continued pulling them closer. Morrison could see alien soldiers through the viewports preparing to board the human vessel. 10 seconds to engine overload, Williams announced. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. The Liberty's edge disappeared in a flash of brilliant light. When Morrison's vision cleared, both Vorthak ships were drifting dead in space, their lights out and their engines silent. "Status report," Morrison called. "All systems functional," Torres replied, sounding amazed. "How are we still alive?" "Because humans are too stubborn to die," Williams said over the intercom. On the planet below, the Vorthak ground forces were in complete chaos. Without support from their ships and facing constant attacks from Zephyrian resistance fighters, they began to retreat to their landing sites, but Morrison was not finished yet. "Clark, can your people capture some of those landing ships?" "Already on it, sir. The Zephyrians have surrounded 3 landing sites. The Vorthaks are trapped." Over. The next few hours, something unprecedented happened in galactic history. The mighty Vorthak Empire, which had never lost a battle, was forced to surrender. The surviving Vorthaks gathered in their remaining functional ships, but they were no longer the confident conquerors who had arrived days earlier. They had been beaten by a single human ship and a species they had considered helpless. "This is impossible," the Vorthak commander transmitted to Morrison. "How did you defeat us? Our ships are stronger, our weapons are better, our soldiers are bigger." Morrison thought about how to answer. Finally, he said, "You made one mistake. You picked on someone weaker than you, and that made us angry." "On to you." Our world, we have a saying, "Don't start a fight with someone who has nothing left to lose." We do not understand. The Zephyrians had nothing left to lose because you were going to kill them all anyway. So they were willing to do anything to stop you. And humans, well, we don't like bullies. The Vorthak ships limped away from the system, carrying word of their defeat back to their empire. For the first time in their history, they had encountered an enemy that fought harder when losing than when winning. In the days that followed, news of the battle spread across the galaxy. Other species who had ignored the Zephyrian pleas for help suddenly became very interested in the humans who had answered the call. "Captain," Dr. Chang reported a week later, "we're receiving communications from 17 different species. They're all asking the same question, which is, they want to know if humans would help them too, if they ever needed it." Morrison looked at the star chart showing dozens of systems where peaceful species lived under the threat of aggressive neighbors. For too long, the galaxy had operated on the principle that might makes right, that the strong could prey on the weak without consequences. That was about to change. "Send the same message to all of them," Morrison said. "Tell them that if someone cries for help, Deathworlders will answer with fire."